Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College. Be coming at you right now with Chapter 15, which is how to use the Details View and FormView controls for the 152.161 ASP.NET class. As it says in this chapter, you'll learn how to use the Details View and FormView controls. Although both are designed to work with the grid view, they can also be used on their own or in combinations with other types of list controls like drop-down lists or list boxes. There are three applications in this chapter. There is a details view, a couple details view ones, and then there's an actual shopping cart application. Alright, so we'll take a look at those as we go on. This is going to be kind of hurried because it's already almost 7 o'clock and usually somebody's in here by 7:30. So, alright, so as you can see here on page 483, what this shows here is a details view designed to display data for a single record. To use this control effectively, you must provide a way for the user to select which item they want to display. The easiest way to do that is to use a details view control in combination with something like a grid view or a drop-down list. At the top of the figure here, you can see the drop-down list and how it's used. So if you pick a product here and you choose it, you get the associated information right here. So as mentioned there, you use the data source ID attribute to specify. Okay, so you use the data source ID attribute in here to specify the data source that a details view control should be bound to. All right, and a details view can be displayed in one of three modes. If it's read-only, as you guess, the current record information is displayed but can't be modified. If it's in edit mode, you can modify the data in the current row. And if it's an insert mode, all right, you can add a new record. All right, and they're mentioned right here. As far as the attributes and child elements, we got three big tables here on page 485, and those tables list the attributes and child elements you use when you're declaring a details view control. The first one has the attributes you're most likely to use. Of course, the data source ID. We talked about auto-generate rows already, and we've talked about paging already. There's a lot of other attributes that you can use with this, but again, most often you're not going to use them, and many of them are just done and used for aesthetic reasons. The second table that you see there lists the child elements that you can use between start and end tags for a details view element. Again, most of these provide styles and templates, hence the name. All right. And then finally on the bottom of the page, the fields element can contain the child elements listed here. All right. When Visual Studio generates a bound field element for a details view control, it includes a sort expression attribute like the grid view. Okay, because the details view control doesn't support sorting, you can delete it because, especially if you're just showing a record, it doesn't make much sense to do that anyway. All right, bottom of page 484, the author mentions, just like when you create a grid view control, one bound field element is created for each element or for each column in the data source that you create for the control. All right, and just like we've seen earlier, if you want to, you can enable paging. They show an example of it right here. And again, it's just the allow paging equal true, and then you set your page settings accordingly. Now, quite often when you use controls like this, you're going to have what's called a master detail page. All right, and notice what it says. It typically contains a control that allows you to display, such as the drop-down list, so that would be the master. And then the data source, which retrieves the items to be displayed, so that would be the detail. Much like if you had department and then the employees who worked under a department, for example. All right, so again, a details view controls that displays the data for each item, okay, and the data source. So it's shown right here, but this is stuff we've already talked about. So again, a master detail page is a page that displays a list of items from a database along with the details of one item from the list. The list portion can be displayed by any control, including a drop-down or a grid view, and the master detail usually includes two data sources, one for the master, one for the detail. As far as updating the data in a details view control, again, besides displaying it, you can use the control to edit, insert, and delete items. All right, if we look at the example here, you can see that we've got all of them set up. All right. So the details view, like the grid view, uses command buttons to let the user edit and delete data or insert data. Thus, as it says here on page 490, the details view control provides those different buttons. In addition, it lets you insert data, so it provides two more buttons. The new button, as mentioned right there, accepts the data entered by the user. Okay. There are two ways to provide the command buttons. The easiest way is to auto-generate the associated button, and that's what's shown here. However, when you use these attributes, you have no control over their appearance. For that, you must use command fields that are going to be described on the next page. So again, you get a common look and feel like this, but if you want to be able to play with them aesthetically, you're going to have to do it by adding the command buttons, as shown here on page 493. So, like the grid view control, the details view control lets you use command field elements to specify command buttons. One way to do that is to use the add field dialog box, which is shown here. To create a command button, you select command field as the type, as you can see right there. Alright, when you do that, 4 checkboxes appear asking basically what abilities you want to allow this to have. In addition, there's a drop-down list that lets you choose whether the command button should be displayed as buttons, as you see here, or as hyperlinks, as we saw in the previous example. When you first display the add field dialog box, you'll notice that only the show cancel button is disabled. That's because that button can be used only in conjunction with the new insert and the edit update buttons. When you select one of these, that box will automatically be enabled. Alright, and also mentioned in the bottom of 492, you can use the add field dialog box to create any of the elements shown in the third table on a previous page. As far as the events that are raised by this, again, you'll notice we get, for example, the same kind of way: inserting, inserted, updating, updated, deleting, deleted type of an idea. So most of these are similar to what we saw in the grid view in the previous chapter. As with the grid view, the most common reason to handle events is to provide for data validation. And the after, so the one that ends with ED, lets you check that the operations have completed successfully. And also, if you're using optimistic concurrency, you should check to make sure there hasn't been a concurrency error. In other words, to make sure, you want to check in here that two people weren't trying to write to the table at the same time. If no error has occurred, all right, as it says, you call data bind, which will basically update the database accordingly. So, as mentioned on the bottom of the page, again, like the grid view, it raises a fence. To determine if an exception has occurred, you can check the exception policy for either to make sure that if there was an exception, or if for some reason you tried to do the update and you weren't allowed to. Template fields next on page 497. You can see examples. You can use template fields to control the appearance of the fields in a details view, like you did in the grid view. In fact, I should go back here and start bringing up these. So, I don't know if this is the first one or if we haven't gotten there yet. I guess probably this will be the product maintenance. Is that the one? Yeah. I think this is the one actually on the next page on 499. So let me back up. All right. So in this example, as they show right here, the first control uses the default bound elements. The second details view illustrates how you can use templates to make it easier to work with. So in other words, notice that the stuff looks kind of squished here as far as this, and here it's not. All right, we can change the names if we want to, even though we didn't. That kind of thing. To create template fields for a data views control, you use the same techniques we use to create template fields for the grid view. All right, so you can see the stuff that's in here is the same stuff that we talked about before, and the ASPX code is very similar to what we've just looked at. So what follows next on 498 and 499 is this product maintenance application. It uses both a grid view and a details view in a master detail page to maintain the products table for the Halloween database. The grid view lists the product records on the left-hand side of the page, and it allows paging to scroll through the products. When you click the select button, the details for that one are displayed on the right. So there's the master, there's the detail type of an idea. If we go back here and we run this again, you'll see the same thing. So notice right now it's Freddy arm. But if I go over here to Frankenstein, select that, you'll see how it changes. I could come in here and edit if I wanted to edit it. So right? It's alive, update, and you notice that's been changed. We could delete it. We could add a new one in here if we wanted to also. All right, you'll see that again, this is done in a list. You know, we've got basically controls in here so we can have multiple. We wanted Superman. Okay, hopefully that all kind of makes sense. The associated ASPX code is shown on pages 500, 501, 502, and 503. So let me jump back. All right. In this first part, you can see the grid view control that displays the products, all right, is in here, as well as the data source for the control. Okay. The author mentions that he generated most of these attributes by applying a scheme to the details view and then editing the associated attributes. So here's the details view information, all right, that we see here from page 501. There's the drop-down list, so you can see there's multiple data sources in here, as you'd probably guess you'd have to have. Plus, if we look here on 502, we can see how all the code has basically been set up for us for our select, our delete, our insert, and our update. And the associated parameters are shown here on page 503. Okay. As far as the code behind file, which is shown on page 505, much more of the same stuff we've already talked about. Even though the app provides complete maintenance for the product table, we only have 4 methods in here. All right. The first 3 handle database exception and concurrency errors, so right here. So if we did have an error, or if we had a concurrency problem, okay, and that would be in the update, and then we've got the same kind of thing in the deleted. We've got the same kind of thing in the inserted right there. The last method that you see in here, the item deleting, handles a problem that can occur when you apply a format to a control that's bound to a data source. Here the currency format is applied to the unit price. Because it uses optimistic concurrency, the original values are passed to the delete statements as parameters to make sure the user hasn't changed the row since it was retrieved. All right. Jumping up all the way here to page 507, we're going to talk about the FormView Control. Okay, there's an introduction to it here, and as you can see, all right, this is really a quirky type of tool to work with. So if you do go through any of these, you've been warned. All right. Like the details view, the form view is designed to display a single item from a data source, but it uses a different approach to displaying the data. So in the figure here, what you can see is an introduction to the form view control. It's similar to the details view control, but it does differ. All right. It isn't restricted by the HTML table layout, so you've got a lot more complete control over the fields that are within here. So again, you can set it up in any way you want. You can put everything on the same line if you had the room to do that, or whatever you want to do. Because you have to use template fields with a form view control, this control can be more difficult to work with than a details view control. When you create a form view control and bound it to a data source, the web forms designer automatically creates default templates as you see in the first figure. Then you can edit them to do what you want. When you click the edit templates from the smart tag, it places you in a template editing mode, as you can see right here. And that's the item, but again, you have similar ones for header, footer, etc. As far as working with this, as mentioned here, and you can see this on page 509, when you use the web's form designer to create a form view control and then bind it to a data source, it automatically generates the templates for you. All right. The item template, as it says, consists of a literal header and a label control for each of field in the data source. The text field uses either the bind or the eval for data binding, and if the data source includes update, delete, or inserts, the item template will include those associated command buttons. Now again, some people like to use this even though it's quirkier, because when you start to work with it, you can get a little bit more control over it. You can make it look a little bit more the way you want it to look. In this example that you see here on page 511, the web's form designer has also generated edit item and insert item templates. All right, they're used to display the fields, as you'd guess, in edit and insert mode. There is a drawback to using the FormView control, and that is after you've edited the template so that the data is arranged the way you want, you'll usually want to provide a similar layout in both the edit item and the insert item, just so you have a common look and feel between them. All right. One way to do that is to copy the code in one template and paste it into another, then make whatever adjustments you have to make. All right. So it can take quite a while to do this, and you'll see that some of the code is again generated for you by doing this. The eval literally means to do that. All right. As they mention here, the code generated is similar to the code generated, well, so they're just showing one of them. So, bottom of page 511, the edit item template determines how the FormView control is rendered in edit mode. It includes update and cancel buttons, and again, it's similar. The insert is similar to the edit item. All right, the final thing that's shown in here on the last few pages is a shopping cart app. But before we do that, let me stop this one. And this was the Chapter 15 product main details. All right, if we look at the product main form view and we do the same thing and we run this, you're going to see the same kind of thing, but the difference is this looks a lot cleaner over here the way that it's set up. It's not grid looking like the other one was. All right. So, but otherwise, other than that, it works just the same way. All right. So, jumping up to page 512, then the last thing that's discussed in the chapter here is a shopping cart form that uses a FormView control. So, what the author does is they present a version of the order page that was originally developed back in chapter 9. Okay. Then they mention here on page 512, to refresh your memory, this figure shows the order page displayed in the shopping cart app. The page lets the user select a product from the drop-down list, and then it populates the other fields accordingly. The difference is that this time the product information is displayed within a FormView control, and the item template has been coded so CSS can be used to display the image to the right of the text. All right. As mentioned, this demonstrates the layout flexibility of the control. As far as the associated, well, let's look at it. Now, ideally at least, when we bring this up and we run this, it shouldn't look that different from what we've seen before on the actual screen to the naked eye itself. Where it's going to change is when we go look at it in design mode. We'll do that in just a minute. Okay. So continue shopping. This should look the same way we saw it before. All right. Okay. Works the same way, etc. Okay. Well, I guess we don't have the checkout page done in here. However, if we stop this and stop the run and go back and look at our order page, and we look at it in design mode, you'll notice differences. Okay. There's our drop down. Okay, we've got this data bound thing in here. Right. We'd have to look at the actual code to see some of the differences. So here we've got the item template, and this is the stuff again along the right hand side, and we've been able to go in and do a lot of formatting with it to make it look better. Okay, you can look at the code here, or again the code is also shown in the book. The ASPX is shown on 515. Again, there's the drop down list hooked up to the data source. There's the form view hooked up to another data source. Okay. The rest of the ASPX file, and then the associated .cs file, last page of the chapter here on page 517. All right. And you'll notice again, what are we doing here? Well, if it's valid, if page is valid. So if we met all of the checks, okay, remember that we did go back in here and we put in validation checks. So if all the validation checks are met, basically we want to be able to write this thing back. All right, that was very quick. Sorry about that. But we'll come back tomorrow and do the same thing with Chapter 16, and on Friday and do the same thing with Chapter 17.